Hello and welcome. You have lived 1,000 moments that will vanish like smoke when your heart gives its final beat. Every cherished face, every whispered secret, every triumph, and every regret exists only in the electrical storms of your mind, fragile and temporary. But what if those moments do not simply disappear into nothing? What if something waits in the shadows beyond death, collecting those fragments of your existence? In the gray realm between life and true death, a figure cloaked in mystery watches over the passage of souls, and based on what the faithful report and what scholars have pieced together from various accounts, she gathers something precious from those who pass through her domain. She collects what makes you, you. The Raven Queen is a deity whose very nature is defined by loss and collection. She dwells in the Shadowfell, that grim reflection of the material plane where colors fade to gray and emotions become muted echoes of themselves. It is a place of eternal twilight, where the landscape mirrors the mortal world, but drains it of vibrancy and warmth. Here, in this realm of shadows and sorrow, she maintains her fortress, and within that fortress, according to those who have glimpsed its nature, she keeps a collection beyond mortal comprehension. The story of how a mortal became the goddess of death is one shrouded in tragedy and transformation. The Raven Queen was not always a deity. Long ago, in an age now lost to time, she was a powerful sorceress and queen of an ancient elven people. She belonged to a civilization whose name has been forgotten, whose history has been erased. She sought to perform a ritual of unimaginable scope, one that would ascend her people to the realm of Arvindor, the heavenly domain of the elven gods. But the ritual was sabotaged. Evil wizards among her followers attempted to divert the energy for their own purposes. In the moment before completion, she reacted with divine fury, and the corrupted ritual became a catastrophic siphon that dragged her and her followers into the Shadowfell. The queen died in that terrible transition. Her mortal form could not survive the forces unleashed by the corrupted ritual. But death in the Shadowfell, especially for one who had already begun to touch divine power, does not always mean the end. As her essence began to dissipate into nothingness, she reached out with the last vestiges of her power and pulled the dead memories of the Shadowfell around her like a cloak. These memories, the lingering fragments of mortals and even dead deities that had collected in that realm over ages, coalesced around her dying consciousness. Over centuries, they accumulated and gave shape to something new. The mortal queen was gone. What emerged was the Raven Queen, a being of divine power constructed from borrowed memories and sustained by them. This origin defines everything about her nature. She is a goddess who exists because of collected memories. Her very form, her identity, her continued existence all depend on the memories she has gathered. And in that catastrophic transformation, her original identity was lost. She cannot remember her mortal name. She cannot recall the specific details of who she was before the ritual. The person she once was has been buried beneath layers of borrowed experiences, thousands upon thousands of other people's memories that now constitute her being. This creates an endless hunger within her, a need to gather more, to collect and preserve what might otherwise be lost. Some scholars who study her suggest this compulsion may stem from a desperate hope that somewhere among all the memories she collects, she might find some fragment of her own lost past. The Shadowfell itself reflects her melancholic nature. It is not a place of active torment like the Nine Hells, nor is it chaotic like the Abyss. Instead, it is a realm of fading and loss. When you walk through the Shadowfell, you tread through a world that feels like a dying memory of the material plane. The trees are gray and skeletal. The sky offers neither true darkness nor genuine light. Everything feels muted, as though you are experiencing reality through thick fog. Emotions become harder to sustain here. Joy requires conscious effort. Passion cools to distant acknowledgement. The Shadowfell does not attack your feelings directly, but it slowly drains them away, like color bleeding from fabric left too long in harsh sun. Within this gray realm, the Raven Queen dwells in what has come to be known as the Fortress of Memories. Accounts from those who have approached it describe a palace constructed from black ice and dark stone. Fragments of dead gods and essences of the deceased, all woven together into a structure that defies conventional architecture. The fortress shifts and changes according to no principles that mortal builders would recognize. It is described as a place of overwhelming sorrow, filled with the memories she has collected and the remnants of divine beings who died in the Shadowfell. The shadar-kai, her devoted servants, have built portions of it from materials they bring to her as offerings, trinkets and items plucked from people's pasts. Ravens fill the skies around her fortress and throughout her domain. They perch on every surface, their glossy black feathers catching what little light exists in that gray realm. These ravens serve as her messengers, carrying her cryptic communications throughout the multiverse. They appear at moments of death, circling overhead, bearing witness to the transition between life and what comes after. Whether they are independent creatures or something more, extensions of her will or consciousness, remains a matter of debate among scholars. What is certain is that they are intimately connected to her power and purpose. The relationship between the Raven Queen and death itself is more nuanced than many understand. She is not a goddess who brings death to mortals or delights in endings. Rather, she watches over the natural cycle, ensuring that death happens at its appointed time and that those who die remain dead. She anticipates each creature's death and works to ensure it meets its end when and where it is supposed to. This makes her a guardian of death's natural order rather than its instigator. Her greatest opposition is reserved for those who cheat death, who use necromantic magic to extend their existence beyond its proper span. Liches who bind their souls to phylacteries, vampires who sustain themselves on stolen life, death knights who refuse to pass on. All of these represent violations of the order she maintains. The mechanics of how she interacts with the dying and collects their memories are not fully documented in mortal texts. What is known comes from fragmentary accounts, from the testimonies of her warlocks and clerics, from rare survivors who passed close to death and returned. These sources suggest that when someone dies, during that brief threshold between life and whatever comes after, there is an interaction with the Raven Queen's domain. The soul passes through the Shadowfell on its journey to its final destination, and during that passage, something is exchanged. Memories that would otherwise be lost entirely, experiences that would dissolve with the death of the consciousness that held them. These can be preserved. Whether this preservation is willing gift or unavoidable toll depends on which interpretation you accept. Her servants play crucial roles in whatever collection process exists. The shadar-kai, those humanoids who have been transformed by devoted service in the Shadowfell, carry out her orders throughout the realms. They are described as fearless of death because they know the Raven Queen will capture their souls and return them to life in the Shadowfell. Death for them becomes merely temporary, a transition rather than an ending. This gives them a unique perspective on mortality and makes them effective servants for a goddess of death. They venture into the mortal world on her behalf, seeking out the strange and unique, gathering objects and stories and experiences that meet criteria only she fully understands. The fortress of memories houses what she has collected over the ages. Accounts describe it as containing not just memories taken from mortals, but also fragments of dead deities, divine essences that lingered in the Shadowfell after their destruction. The exact form this collection takes remains uncertain. Some describe vast halls filled with trinkets and physical objects, items that carry memories attached to them. Others speak of something more metaphysical, the memories themselves preserved in forms that mortal senses cannot quite perceive. The fortress is described as a twisted castle, built from fragments and essences, a structure that embodies loss and preservation simultaneously. Her appearance, when she manifests, is said to be both beautiful and unsettling. She is depicted as a tall, pale figure draped in darkness, often accompanied by ravens that seem to be part of her form rather than separate creatures. Her face is described variably as sorrowful, as emotionless, as somehow both present and absent. This inconsistency in descriptions might reflect her nature as a being constructed from many identities, rather than possessing a single fixed form. She is the matron of death, the matron of ravens, the dusk maven, titles that replace the name she can no longer remember. Those who worship the Raven Queen accept difficult truths about mortality. Her faith teaches that death is natural and final, that clinging to existence beyond your appointed time corrupts the proper order of things. Her clerics do not promise easy resurrections or comfortable afterlives. Instead, they preach acceptance of mortality's reality and the importance of living meaningfully in the time you have. This is not a popular message compared to deities who offer eternal paradise. Yet some are drawn to this stark honesty, finding comfort in a goddess who does not hide death's nature behind pleasant lies. Her warlocks, those mortals who enter into pacts with her in exchange for power, gain abilities related to death and shadow. The exact terms of these pacts vary, but they generally involve service to her causes, particularly the hunting of undead and prevention of necromantic corruption. Breaking a pact with the Raven Queen is described as bringing serious consequences. She may send the shadar-kai to hunt those who betray their oaths. Some accounts suggest that oath breakers become haunted, almost soulless, unable to connect properly with others, as though part of their essential being has been removed. The Shadowfell under her rule is a place of strange laws and stranger manifestations. Time flows differently there. Distance becomes negotiable. The environment responds to her will in ways that defy mortal understanding of how reality should function. This is her domain in the most absolute sense. Here, her power is nearly absolute. Even other deities approach the Shadowfell with caution, knowing that on her home ground, the Raven Queen commands forces that make challenging her extremely dangerous. When mortals die, their souls journey to whatever afterlife their deeds and devotions have earned them. But the journey passes through shadow. Through that gray space, the Raven Queen claims as hers. What happens in that passage, what she takes or receives or preserves during that brief transition, shapes both the nature of the dead and the composition of her ever-growing collection. You will make that journey eventually. Every mortal does, and when you pass through that gray twilight, you will encounter, in some form, the goddess who exists, because she gathered the memories of the dead around her like armor against oblivion. What she will take from you, if anything, depends on what you carry that she values, what experiences you hold that deserve preservation in her eternal archive. Section 2. The Harvest of Fading Echoes. The nature of what happens when a soul passes through the Shadowfell remains one of the great mysteries surrounding the Raven Queen. Her followers speak of a collection, of preservation, of moments saved from oblivion. Scholars who study death magic theorize about mechanisms and processes. But the exact details of what occurs during that threshold between life and afterlife are known fully only to the goddess herself, and perhaps to those souls who have already made the journey. What is documented comes from fragmentary sources. Warlocks who serve her report visions granted through their pacts, glimpses of the process she oversees. Clerics who have been resurrected describe strange sensations during their time in death, feelings of something being assessed or evaluated. The shadar-kai, her devoted servants, speak in cryptic terms about the work they perform on her behalf. From these various accounts, a picture emerges, though whether it represents literal truth or symbolic understanding remains uncertain. The ravens appear at moments of death. This much is consistently reported across cultures and worlds. When someone dies, particularly someone whose passing holds significance, ravens gather. They circle overhead or perch nearby, watching with intelligent eyes. In some accounts, they are described as seeming to count the dying or observe specific individuals among a group of casualties. Whether these are ordinary ravens drawn by some instinct, or whether they are manifestations of the Raven Queen's awareness, remains debated. Her followers believe the ravens serve as her eyes, allowing her to witness deaths throughout the multiverse. Through them, she determines which souls carry experiences worth preserving in her collection. The moment of death creates a threshold state that exists outside normal time and space. Your consciousness, freed from flesh, no longer experiences reality in the linear fashion that characterized mortal existence. In this state, according to those who have been resurrected and retain fragmentary memories of the experience, you become aware of the Shadowfell's presence. It is described as a pulling sensation, a gravity that draws all souls through that gray realm regardless of their final destination. This passage happens quickly from an external perspective, but within the experience itself, time becomes strange. What lasts a moment might feel like hours. What should take hours might pass in an instant. During this passage, the Raven Queen's influence manifests. Accounts describe it differently depending on the source. Some speak of actually encountering her servants, shadar-kai collectors who approach the soul and examine it with methods that defy mortal understanding. Others describe a more abstract experience, a sense of being observed and evaluated by a presence vast and cold. Still, others report seeing nothing unusual, but arriving in their afterlife with the unsettling awareness that something has changed, that they are somehow different than they were in the moment before death. The concept of memory as a collectible substance requires understanding how the multiverse treats consciousness and experience. In the framework of existence that includes gods and magic, souls and afterlives, memory is not merely neurological, it has metaphysical weight. Strong memories, experiences charged with intense emotion or profound significance, leave marks on the soul itself. These marks can be perceived by beings with the proper senses. They can be touched, manipulated, and potentially separated from the soul that carries them. This principle underlies certain mind-affecting magic that mortals can learn. It also suggests mechanisms by which the Raven Queen might interact with the memories of the dead. Her need for memories stems from her origin. She is a being constructed from the collected memories of the Shadowfell, fragments of consciousness that accumulated in that realm over ages. This is documented in accounts of her ascension. When the corrupted ritual killed her mortal form, she pulled these dead memories around herself and used them to create a new existence. This process apparently continues. She sustains herself through ongoing collection, through gathering new memories to add to the structure of her divine consciousness. Without this constant accumulation, some scholars theorize, she might begin to fade or lose coherence. The collection is not merely compulsion, but necessity, the method by which she maintains her existence as a deity. The shadar-kai play a crucial role in whatever process she employs. These servants are mortals who have been transformed through devoted service in the Shadowfell. They exist in a strange relationship with death. When a shadar-kai dies, the Raven Queen captures their soul and returns them to life in the Shadowfell, granting them a form of practical immortality. This cycle of death and return strips away emotional capacity gradually. Each resurrection leaves them slightly more hollow, slightly less capable of feeling. They become beings who remember emotions, but cannot fully experience them anymore. This transformation serves the Raven Queen's purposes, creating servants who are fearless and utterly devoted, because they have lost the capacity for the doubts and hesitations that ordinary mortals experience. These shadar-kai venture throughout the multiverse on errands for their mistress. They seek the strange and unique, objects and stories that meet criteria only she fully understands. When they encounter sites of mass death, battlefields where hundreds fell, or cities devastated by plague, they perform collection rituals. Accounts from those who have witnessed these rituals describe the shadar-kai moving among the dead, touching bodies, or simply standing in meditation while speaking words in languages that hurt mortal ears to hear. What they gather is not always clear. Sometimes they take physical objects, trinkets, and possessions from the deceased. Other times they seem to collect something intangible, gesturing as though pulling invisible threads from the air and winding them into containers that seem to hold nothing yet become heavier with each collection. The emotional residue of death creates strange manifestations in the Shadowfell. The sorrow-sworn are creatures born from concentrated negative emotions, given physical form in that gray realm. They embody specific feelings. The lonely represent isolation. The wretched manifest self-loathing. The angry are rage made flesh. These creatures haunt the Shadowfell, drawn to sources of suffering and despair. Some scholars who study the planes suggest a connection between the sorrow-sworn and the Raven Queen's collection. When memories heavy with trauma are separated from souls, when experiences of profound loss or devastating betrayal are removed, the emotional weight must go somewhere. It is possible, though not confirmed, that this emotional residue becomes the sorrow-sworn, that these creatures are essentially the feelings stripped from memories during the collection process. The distinction between memory and essential self becomes critical when considering what might be taken versus what must be preserved. Your soul carries your fundamental nature, your alignment, your capacity for thought and continued existence. Memories are more like possessions the soul carries, valuable, but not strictly essential. This suggests that memories could be removed without destroying the soul's integrity. The soul that continues to its afterlife would remain you in some core sense, even if it lacked certain recollections. Whether this distinction is meaningful in practical terms remains a matter of philosophical debate. If you cannot remember falling in love, if that experience has been taken from you, are you truly still the same person who experienced it? Those who have been resurrected provide the most direct evidence that something is taken during death. When raised dead or resurrection magic pulls someone back from the afterlife, they return changed, not dramatically, not obviously, but in subtle ways that become apparent over time. They might struggle to recall specific events that should be memorable. They might look at loved ones and feel that some aspect of their connection has dulled. They know they are missing something, but cannot articulate exactly what. This phenomenon is consistent enough across multiple accounts from different sources that it supports the theory of extraction during the death passage. Something is removed during that threshold moment, something that does not return when the soul is recalled to life. The Raven Queen's focus appears to prioritize certain categories of memory over others, based on accounts from her followers and the patterns observed in those who return from death. She seems particularly interested in memories related to undeath. Anyone who encountered liches or vampires or other powerful undead during life will likely have those specific memories claimed. This serves her eternal war against those who violate death's natural order. The intelligence gathered from thousands of mortals who interacted with undead entities gives her comprehensive understanding of their weaknesses and methods. Names hold special significance in her collection. This is confirmed by multiple sources. She gathers the names of the dead with particular attention. Every soul that passes through her domain surrenders knowledge of what they were called, the specific sounds and syllables that identified them in life. This fixation connects to her own lost name, the identity she cannot recover from before her transformation. By collecting all names, she may hope to eventually find her own among them, or to recognize patterns that might reveal what she was called in her mortal existence. Memories of divine encounters appear valuable to her as well. Mortals who met gods directly, who witnessed divine interventions, who participated in events where deities manifested personally. These experiences likely attract her interest. They provide intelligence about other divine beings, insights into how gods operate, and what vulnerabilities they might possess. In the complex web of divine politics, such knowledge represents significant advantage. Ancient historical knowledge, particularly from civilizations that no longer exist, seems to be preserved in her collection. When the last speaker of a dead language passes away, that linguistic knowledge goes to her. When a lost empire's final survivor dies, their memories of that culture become part of her archive. This makes her a repository of lost heritage, a keeper of knowledge that exists nowhere else in the multiverse. Whether she actively uses this historical information or simply hoards it as part of her compulsive collection remains unclear. The process of extraction, if it occurs as theorized, must be careful and precise. Removing memories from a soul without destroying the soul's fundamental integrity requires delicate work. This could explain why the shadar-kai are employed in collection, why beings transformed by service to the Raven Queen handle the sensitive task of separating memory from essence. They possess understanding of death and consciousness that ordinary mortals lack. Their repeated experiences with death and resurrection might grant them insight into the structure of souls, allowing them to perceive where memories can be safely severed from the whole. When someone dies and is brought back multiple times, the cumulative effect becomes more pronounced. Each death and resurrection cycle provides another opportunity for collection. People who have died 3 or 4 times often exhibit significant memory degradation. They retain general knowledge of their lives, but lack specific recollections that give those lives texture and meaning. Their personalities can seem flattened, less distinct, as though important defining characteristics have been eroded away. This pattern suggests that repeated exposure to the death threshold results in more extensive harvesting. The question of consent arises when considering the Raven Queen's collection. Do souls have a choice in what is taken? Can you resist or negotiate? Based on available accounts, the answer appears to be no. The passage through the Shadowfell is mandatory for all dying souls regardless of their final destination. During that passage, the Raven Queen's authority is absolute. She determines what is taken. She decides what is preserved in her fortress and what is allowed to continue with the soul to its afterlife. This lack of agency troubles some who study her, suggesting a predatory aspect to her nature. Others argue that she preserves what would otherwise be completely lost, that without her collection, those memories would simply dissolve into nothing, making her more curator than thief. The collected memories, once gathered, appear to be permanently retained. There are no accounts of the Raven Queen discarding or releasing memories she has claimed. Once something enters her collection, it remains there indefinitely. This suggests either infinite capacity within her archive or some method of organization that prevents overflow despite millennia of constant accumulation. The mechanics of how she stores and accesses such vast quantities of information remain among the deep mysteries of her nature. Your eventual passage through this process is inevitable if death finds you in the normal course of existence. When your life ends, when consciousness separates from body, you will travel through that gray space regardless of your beliefs or preparations. Whether you encounter collection directly, whether you experience the process consciously or remain unaware of it, depends on factors beyond mortal understanding. But something will likely be different when you reach your final destination. Some piece of you will remain behind in the Shadowfell, added to a collection that spans ages, preserved forever in the archives of a goddess who exists because she learned to build herself from borrowed memories. Section 3. What she claims and her purpose. The Raven Queen's collection serves purposes both strategic and deeply personal. Understanding what she values reveals the nature of her divine mission and the tragedy that drives her endless accumulation. Each memory she preserves contributes to goals that span millennia. Each stolen moment serves functions that mortals can only partially comprehend. When examining the patterns in what is taken from the dead, when listening to the accounts of her followers, and studying the gaps left in those who return from death, certain priorities become clear. Names occupy a position of supreme importance in her collection. This is confirmed across multiple sources and consistently emphasized by those who serve her. The Raven Queen gathers names with fervent dedication, claiming the knowledge of what people were called in life. Every soul passing through her domain surrenders this most intimate form of identification. She collects the names of mortals and immortals alike, building what must be an incomprehensible catalog of identities spanning ages and worlds. The reason for this obsession connects directly to her origin story. When the corrupted ritual transformed her from mortal queen into divine being, her original name was lost. She cannot remember what she was called before her ascension. Scholars who study her suggest this creates an unending search, a hope that somewhere among the billions of names she has collected, she might find her own or recognize patterns that could reveal it. The power inherent in names makes this collection strategically valuable as well. In the multiverse, knowing something's true name grants leverage over it, the ability to summon or bind or command under certain circumstances. By possessing the names of countless beings, the Raven Queen accumulates power beyond the obvious. She knows what to call entities that most have forgotten. She understands naming patterns from dead civilizations. She can identify beings who attempt to hide their true identities by recognizing linguistic structures from their culture of origin. Her war against undeath defines much of her activity and shapes what she claims from the dead. The Raven Queen's opposition to those who cheat death through necromantic means is fundamental to her divine portfolio. She anticipates each creature's death and works to ensure it meets its end at the appointed time. Those who violate this natural order through transformation into liches, vampires, death knights, or other undead abominations become her enemies. This is documented clearly in accounts of her nature and the missions she assigns to her servants. She hunts powerful undead with relentless determination, supports mortal heroes who fight necromancers, and sabotages rituals that would create new violations of death's proper function. The memories she harvests from mortals who encountered undead serve as intelligence in this eternal conflict. If you witnessed a lich's activities during life, if you learned the location of a vampire's lair, if you participated in necromantic research, these experiences hold particular value to her by accumulating knowledge from thousands of people who interacted with undead across centuries. She builds comprehensive understanding of her enemies. This gives her tactical advantages when confronting specific threats. She knows their histories, their methods, their vulnerabilities, all assembled from the fragmented perspectives of countless mortal witnesses. Her vendetta against Orcus exemplifies how she employs collected intelligence. Orcus, the demon prince of undeath, represents everything she opposes concentrated into a single entity of terrible power. He commands legions of undead and seeks to transform all living things into mindless servants. The conflict between the Raven Queen and Orcus has raged across planes and ages. Her advantage comes partly from accumulated knowledge. She has gathered memories from mortals who encountered his servants, who witnessed his rituals, who learned fragments of his schemes. By assembling these fragments over centuries, she can predict his movements and counter his plans. This suggests a pattern where the Raven Queen uses her collection as a strategic database, cross-referencing information from multiple sources to build complete pictures of threats she opposes. When powerful necromancers die, regardless of their soul's ultimate destination, they pass through the Shadowfell during that threshold moment. It stands to reason that, during this passage, the Raven Queen would claim their expertise, the spells they mastered, the techniques they developed, the practical knowledge that made them dangerous. All of this represents exactly the kind of information she values for her war against undeath. If such harvesting occurs, it would serve dual purposes: weakening the forces of undeath by denying them that expertise in whatever afterlife awaits, and continuously updating the Raven Queen's understanding of necromantic advancement. Secret knowledge attracts her attention as well, based on accounts from her followers. Mortals who learned forbidden truths, who uncovered mysteries meant to stay hidden, who acquired dangerous understanding through research or revelation. These individuals likely interest her when they die. Claiming such secrets serves multiple purposes. It prevents dangerous knowledge from spreading beyond control. It adds to her own understanding of the multiverse's hidden workings. It establishes her as a keeper of mysteries, someone who possesses truths too dangerous for general circulation. This role gives her leverage in divine politics, bargaining power when dealing with other deities who might need information she alone possesses. Ancient history, particularly from civilizations that no longer exist, appears to be preserved thoroughly in her collection. The multiverse has seen countless empires rise and fall, ages of glory followed by catastrophic collapse. Much knowledge has been lost in these transitions. languages forgotten, technologies abandoned, magical techniques that vanished when their practitioners died. But if the Raven Queen collects the memories of everyone who dies, then she possesses recollections from people who lived through those lost ages. When the last native speaker of an ancient tongue passes away, their knowledge of that language would go to her. When a vanished empire's final survivor dies, memories of how that society functioned would become part of her archive. This makes her, in effect, a living repository of lost civilizations, a keeper of heritage that exists nowhere else. The practical applications of historical knowledge become apparent when ancient threats resurface. Evils defeated long ago sometimes return, awakened from imprisonment or summoned by foolish mortals. When this happens, the Raven Queen may possess memories from people who fought those threats originally, who knew their weaknesses, who understood how they were first defeated. She can grant this knowledge to her servants or allies, providing tactical advantages against dangers the world has forgotten. Similarly, when ancient artifacts resurface, objects whose purposes have been lost to time, she might have collected memories from their creators or original users, allowing her to understand their functions and hazards. Memories of divine encounters hold strategic value in the complex web of relationships among deities. Mortals who met gods directly, who witnessed divine manifestations, who participated in events where deities intervened personally in mortal affairs. These experiences provide insight into how other gods think and operate. The Raven Queen exists within a network of divine alliances and rivalries that shape the functioning of the multiverse. Intelligence about other deities helps her navigate these relationships more effectively. A memory of Pellar intervening to save innocents reveals something about his priorities and methods. A memory of Asmodeus making a bargain with a desperate mortal shows patterns in how the Lord of the Nine Hells conducts negotiations, accumulated across thousands of such encounters. This intelligence builds comprehensive understanding of the divine landscape. Memories related to the Shadowfell itself are claimed completely, according to those who have traveled that realm and returned. Anyone who entered her domain while living, who witnessed events occurring there, who learned secrets about its nature, finds those specific recollections becoming vague and difficult to articulate afterward. This suggests the Raven Queen is protective of information about her realm. By controlling knowledge about the Shadowfell, she maintains security and prevents enemies from learning its geography or the locations of important sites within her domain. Visitors who leave often report that they remember the general atmosphere, but struggle to recall specific details when trying to share information with others. Personal memories charged with intense emotion appear to interest her as well, though the reasoning is less obvious than her strategic collections. Moments of profound love, instances of devastating betrayal, experiences of transcendent joy or crushing despair. These emotionally saturated memories have a quality that seems to fascinate her. This could relate to her nature as a being constructed from collected memories. Perhaps she studies emotion to better understand the mortal experience she has transcended. Perhaps emotionally charged memories have properties that make them more stable or useful for whatever purpose her collection ultimately serves. Or perhaps, given that her servants gradually lose their capacity for feeling, she preserves what they lose as a form of record or memorial. The memory of causing death is almost certainly claimed based on patterns observed in resurrected warriors and assassins. If you ended another person's life, whether in battle or murder, in self-defense or calculated execution, that experience holds significance for a goddess of death. She collects death from multiple perspectives: the experience of dying and the experience of causing death. This gives her comprehensive understanding of how mortality ends, the 1,000 variations of that final moment. A warrior who killed many in combat often returns from death unable to recall specific faces or encounters, retaining only general awareness of having fought. An assassin who took lives for coin may lose detailed memory of their kills. The careful planning and precise execution. This pattern suggests the Raven Queen gathers these moments not for judgment, but for completion of her understanding of death in all its forms. Memories of successful resurrections receive particular attention, which makes sense given her role as guardian of death's proper order. When someone dies and is brought back through raised dead or resurrection or true resurrection, that entire experience represents an unusual occurrence. The Raven Queen allows these magics to function because they serve the natural order in their own way, restoring life cut short prematurely, giving second chances to those whose purposes remain unfulfilled. But when someone who was resurrected dies again permanently, she would logically want detailed memories of what that process felt like, how the magic functioned, what allowed the soul to be recalled from beyond death. This knowledge helps her understand the boundaries of mortality, the points where life and death become negotiable through divine or arcane intervention. Memories of pacts with powerful entities are harvested thoroughly based on what her warlocks report. If you made a deal with a devil, swore an oath to a demon, entered into contract with a fae or ancient dragon, or any being of significant power, she wants to know the terms. These pacts reveal much about the entities involved, their desires and methods, their weaknesses and priorities. A devil's contract might seem perfect, but the memory of how it was negotiated, what the devil emphasized and what they glossed over, what clauses they insisted upon, and what they conceded, all of this provides insight into that particular devil's nature. By collecting memories of countless such pacts, the Raven Queen builds deep understanding of how various powerful beings operate when dealing with mortals. The strategic value of her collection extends beyond individual memories to patterns emerging from aggregation. when she possesses memories from thousands of people who experienced the same historical event. She can reconstruct that event with accuracy impossible for mortal historians. When she has memories from people across all levels of a society, from rulers to servants, she understands how that civilization functioned in ways no single perspective could provide. When she collects memories spanning centuries from a particular region, she perceives long-term patterns invisible to those who live normal lifespans. This macro-level understanding makes her one of the most knowledgeable beings about mortal affairs, able to see grand movements of history and slow changes in culture that define civilizations. Her purposes clearly extend beyond the purely practical. There is something almost tragic about her endless collection, a quality of desperate searching that her followers sometimes speak of with reverence and sadness. She is attempting to find herself in the experiences of others, trying to reconstruct identity through accumulation, building a sense of self from borrowed moments of countless lives. Every name she collects might be her name. Every memory of transformation or ascension might contain clues about her own past. Every fragment of ancient history might include some reference to who she was before the ritual that killed her mortal form and birthed her divine existence. The collection serves as both tool and obsession, both strategic database and compulsive search. It gives her advantages in her war against undeath. It provides leverage in divine politics. It preserves knowledge that would otherwise be completely lost. But at its heart, beneath all the practical applications, lies a goddess who cannot remember who she was, gathering the memories of everyone else in hopes that somewhere among them she might find the answer to the question that defines her existence. What was my name? When you die, when you pass through that threshold and encounter whatever mechanism she employs for collection, you contribute to something larger than you can comprehend. Your moments join billions of others in an archive spanning ages. What you knew, what you felt, what you witnessed, all of it feeds into her eternal search and her endless war. You might resent this taking if you understood it was happening, but the passage is brief, and what comes after occupies your attention more completely than what was lost in between. The Raven Queen claims what she seeks. She has done so for ages, and your memories, should they meet her criteria, will serve purposes you will never know, preserved forever in the fortress of a goddess who exists because she learned to construct herself from the forgotten moments of the dead. Section 4. The cost of her collection. The consequences of the Raven Queen's influence extend far beyond the moment of death. What she takes, what she claims, what she preserves, all of this creates ripples that affect not only souls in the afterlife, but also those who serve her in life and those who draw her attention while still breathing. Understanding these costs reveals the darker complexities of her nature, the ways in which devotion to her purposes or simple proximity to her power transforms those caught in her orbit. When you arrive in your afterlife missing memories that were claimed during passage through the Shadowfell, you face challenges in reconnecting with those who preceded you in death. This is a logical consequence if the theories about memory collection prove accurate. Imagine reaching the realm of your deity, reuniting with family members who died years before you, only to discover gaps in your recollection. You know you loved them. You retain the general sense of your relationship, but specific moments you shared, particular conversations that defined your bond, these might be absent. Your mother embraces you and mentions an event from childhood, something she considers cherished, and you struggle to remember because that memory may have been harvested. The imbalance creates a strange form of isolation, even in paradise, where others remember you completely, but you cannot remember them with equal clarity. For warriors whose combat memories were claimed, arriving in an afterlife where martial prowess matters presents difficulties. If you reach a realm where the honored dead engage in eternal battles or training, but you cannot remember the techniques that once defined you, you must relearn everything from the beginning. You know you were skilled because others tell you of your legendary battles. But when you try to recreate those movements, to recall the strategies that made you formidable, the knowledge is simply absent. This pattern has been reported by some who were resurrected and found their combat instincts strangely diminished, suggesting that such specific skill memories can indeed be separated from the soul. Scholars who devoted their lives to preserving ancient knowledge face perhaps the cruelest cost if their expertise was harvested. Decades of study, countless hours of careful translation, deep understanding achieved through tremendous effort, all of it gone. They remember studying. They remember being experts. But the actual information, the substance of their expertise, has been claimed for the Raven Queen's collection. Their life's work has been transferred to her archives, where they cannot access it or build upon it further. This represents a form of intellectual theft that some philosophers who study death magic find deeply troubling. Though her followers argue she preserves what would otherwise be completely lost. The living who attract the Raven Queen's attention face different but equally significant costs. Drawing her notice can happen through various means. Defying death through resurrection multiple times marks you as someone she watches with interest. Hunting powerful undead brings you into alignment with her purposes, which can lead to recruitment attempts. Entering the Shadowfell and surviving when you were not expected to creates a connection. Sometimes her servants simply appear with offers of power, explaining that the Raven Queen has observed you and sees potential worth cultivating. The warlock pact she offers provides real and substantial power. Warlocks of the Raven Queen command abilities related to death and shadow, documented in magical traditions across multiple worlds. They gain capacity to sense undead, to resist necrotic damage, to perceive things hidden from ordinary sight. For someone dedicated to fighting necromancers or hunting vampires, these abilities prove invaluable. But the pact comes with obligations that reshape your entire existence. You are expected to prioritize her goals. When she identifies an undead threat requiring elimination, you go and eliminate it regardless of personal plans. When she requires information about something you encountered, you provide it in full detail. The compulsion woven into warlock pacts is well documented in arcane studies. Resisting her commands causes discomfort that intensifies the longer you delay compliance. Warlocks who attempt to ignore her directives report feeling pulled in specific directions, experiencing headaches that worsen into migraines, suffering nightmares that disrupt sleep. This is not slavery in the conventional sense. You retain free will and personality. But the magical agreement creates pressure that makes defiance increasingly difficult and painful. Breaking a pact with the Raven Queen brings serious consequences. Accounts suggest she may send shadar-kai to hunt oathbreakers, or that those who betray their agreements become haunted and diminished, unable to connect properly with others, as though something essential has been removed from them. The transformation that occurs in her warlocks progresses gradually. You begin perceiving the world differently. Colors seem less vibrant, as though you are seeing everything through gray filter. Emotions become muted. Joy remains possible, but requires more stimulus to achieve. Anger cools quickly into cold determination. Love persists, but feels distant, like a memory of feeling rather than feeling itself. This is the influence of the Shadowfell bleeding into you through your connection to the Raven Queen. The more you use her power, the more missions you complete for her, the stronger this effect becomes. Veteran warlocks who have served her for years often resemble shadar-kai themselves, pale and hollow-eyed, speaking rarely, expressing little emotion, even in situations that should provoke strong reactions. Your memories may begin to fade even before death. This is not the sudden stripping that theoretically occurs at death's threshold. Instead, it manifests as slow erosion, particular memories becoming hazier over time. Moments of warmth and happiness seem to deteriorate faster than neutral or negative memories. You might struggle to recall the face of someone you loved, even though you saw them recently. This memory degradation, reported by some long-serving warlocks, could serve the Raven Queen's purposes by making you less attached to mortal life, less distracted by personal concerns, more focused on the missions she assigns. But it also means losing yourself piece by piece long before you actually die. The shadar-kai represent the ultimate endpoint of service to the Raven Queen. These beings were mortals who entered her service and lived in the Shadowfell, devoting themselves completely to her purposes. Over time measured in decades or centuries, the Shadowfell transformed them. This transformation is documented across multiple sources. Their skin became pale, almost translucent. Their hair lost color, turning white or gray regardless of age. Their eyes grew dark and cold, but the physical changes are minor compared to the emotional deterioration. Shadar-kai gradually lose their capacity to feel anything deeply. Emotions become distant echoes, faint approximations of what they once experienced. This emotional erosion is confirmed in accounts from those who have encountered shadar-kai. They remember that they once loved someone, but they cannot actually feel that love anymore. They retain knowledge that certain events should make them happy or sad, but the actual emotions do not arise. This creates a hollow existence where they go through motions without inner experience. They continue serving the Raven Queen because they always have, because purpose persists even when feeling fades, because without that service, they would have nothing at all. Many shadar-kai seek extreme experiences in desperate attempts to feel something, anything. They engage in dangerous activities, pursue intense stimuli, deliberately place themselves in situations that should provoke strong emotions. Sometimes these efforts succeed briefly, producing fleeting moments of genuine feeling that fade quickly back into gray emptiness. The relationship between shadar-kai and death itself is unusual. They are described as fearless of death because they know the Raven Queen will capture their souls and return them to life in the Shadowfell. Death for them becomes merely temporary, a transition rather than an ending. This cycle of death and resurrection is part of what strips away their emotional capacity. Each return leaves them slightly more hollow, slightly less capable of genuine feeling. The Raven Queen grants them this form of immortality, but the cost is the gradual loss of everything that makes existence meaningful beyond simple continuation. The masks that shadar-kai wear serve multiple documented purposes. They hide faces that have become unsettling to look upon, features marked by too much time in the Shadowfell. They provide identity in a culture where internal sense of self has eroded. They express emotions that the wearer can no longer genuinely feel, painted smiles, or exaggerated frowns that communicate to others what the shadar-kai wishes they could experience. Some shadar-kai collect vast numbers of masks, different ones for different situations, different expressions for different contexts. The masks become more real than the faces beneath them, more expressive of personality than the numb beings who wear them. Those who cheat death through undeath face the harshest treatment when the Raven Queen finally claims them. If you became a lich, binding your soul to a phylactery and sustaining existence through necromantic rituals, you have declared yourself her enemy. She hunts liches with particular determination, viewing them as violations of everything she represents. This opposition to undeath is fundamental to her nature and well documented in accounts of her divine portfolio. When she destroys such beings, when phylacteries are shattered and undead forms obliterated, those souls pass through her threshold like all the dead. Based on her documented hatred of undeath and her role as guardian of death's natural order. It stands to reason that the harvest these souls experience would be far more aggressive than what ordinary mortals endure. If the theories about her collection process are accurate, a destroyed lich would have almost everything taken. Every memory of their time as undead, every piece of necromantic knowledge they accumulated, every moment of the extended existence they fought to maintain. All of this represents exactly what she would want to claim. The soul continuing beyond that harvest would be left nearly blank, retaining only the most fundamental aspects of identity. And because becoming a lich represents such profound violation of natural order, the afterlife, receiving that diminished soul, would likely be unpleasant. They would face eternal consequences, stripped of the memories that might help them understand why those consequences are just. Vampires would face similar treatment based on the same logic. When a vampire is truly destroyed and their soul passes through death's threshold, the Raven Queen would have every reason to claim not just memories, but potentially their entire sense of identity. The vampire who terrorized a region for centuries, who built a legacy of fear and death, might arrive at their final destination with no awareness of any of it. They would not remember victims, schemes, or even their own name. This would represent erasure on a profound level. Punishment through forced forgetting that removes even the capacity to regret one's actions. For those brought back through resurrection, the cost manifests as persistent gaps in recollection. You died, passed through the Raven Queen's threshold, potentially had memories harvested, and then magic pulled you back to life. But what was taken does not return with you. This pattern is consistently reported by those who have been resurrected. You resume living with holes in your memory that you might not notice immediately. You reconnect with friends and family, return to your work or adventures, and gradually realize something is wrong. People mention events you do not remember. You look at someone you should know well and cannot quite place them. You try to recall specific skills or knowledge you once possessed and find only frustration. This creates secondary trauma beyond the experience of dying itself. You must cope with knowing you are incomplete, that parts of you are simply gone and will never return. Some who have been resurrected become obsessed with trying to determine what they lost, questioning everyone who knew them, attempting to reconstruct missing memories through external accounts. But hearing about an experience differs fundamentally from remembering it. You can learn the facts of what you did, but you cannot reclaim the internal experience of having done it. Other resurrected individuals try ignoring the gaps, pretending everything is fine, constructing false memories to fill spaces where real ones should exist. This rarely works well and often leads to situations where fabricated memories conflict with reality. Multiple resurrections compound the problem. Each time you die and return, assuming the collection process occurs each time, more memories are claimed. People who have died and been brought back 3 or 4 times often experience severe memory degradation. They struggle to recall much of their past beyond vague outlines. They know general facts about themselves, but lack specific memories that give those facts meaning and context. Their personality can become strange and inconsistent, shaped by gaps they cannot articulate. Friends comment that they seem different after each resurrection, changed in ways hard to define. This is because, if the theories are accurate, each harvest removes more of what made them who they were. The Raven Queen's collection also costs those who remain living after someone close to them dies. You might have shared important experiences with someone, moments that defined your relationship. When they die, if the Raven Queen harvests some of those shared memories, you could later discover through speak with dead or similar magic that they do not remember events precious to you. The time you spent together, the bond you built, exists now only in your recollection. They have forgotten. This creates painful asymmetry where you grieve not just their death, but also the loss of shared history. You become the sole keeper of memories that should have belonged to both of you. Her servants who work most closely with collection processes face unique hazards. The shadar-kai who extract memories from the dead, who handle whatever containers hold stolen experiences, who catalog and organize the harvest. These individuals are exposed constantly to fragments of other people's lives. This exposure could affect them beyond the normal emotional erosion all shadar-kai experience. They might begin confusing their own memories with the ones they handle, remembering events from hundreds of different lives that they never actually experienced. They might struggle to determine what is genuinely their own past versus what they have absorbed from professional exposure to countless stolen moments. This confusion of identity could become severe enough to be debilitating. Shadar-kai collectors might lose themselves entirely, their personalities fragmenting into collections of borrowed traits and memories that do not cohere into consistent identities. This fate is considered particularly tragic among her followers, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the work they do. Yet the collection must continue if it serves the purposes they believe in, and someone must handle it. So they accept the risks and hope they will be among those who retain themselves. Even those who merely live in the Shadowfell without directly serving the Raven Queen suffer costs. The plane itself slowly drains feeling and vitality from those who dwell there too long. This effect is documented in accounts from travelers who spent extended time in that gray realm. Positive emotions become harder to sustain with each passing day. Laughter requires more effort. Hope feels increasingly difficult to maintain. Fear remains easily accessible, as does anger and despair. But joy and love and excitement fade into background noise. This is not merely psychological. The Shadowfell actively leaches these feelings through mechanisms related to its fundamental nature as a realm of shadow and loss. Extended exposure can leave permanent marks, making it difficult to fully feel positive emotions even after returning to other planes. The Raven Queen does not apologize for these costs based on what her followers report. She does not express regret about damage her collection causes or the transformations her servants undergo. From her perspective, as communicated through her clerics and warlocks, she maintains necessary order, preserves what would be lost, ensures that death maintains its proper function in the multiverse. If her servants are changed by their service, if mortals are damaged by her attention, if the dead arrive in afterlives incomplete, these are simply facts of existence within the system she inherited when she ascended to divinity. She did not create this order. She administers what was already in place, performs functions that someone must perform. Yet those who pay the costs might disagree with this assessment. The warlock who loses capacity to feel joy might argue the price is too high. The scholar whose life's work is claimed might consider it theft rather than preservation. The family members separated by incomplete memories might see cruelty rather than cosmic necessity. But the Raven Queen does not negotiate these matters with mortals according to all available accounts. She does not debate the ethics of her collection. She simply continues, harvest after harvest, age after age, claiming what she seeks from every soul passing through her domain, and those damaged by the process must cope as best they can with the costs of her eternal need, serving purposes they may never fully understand, paying prices that were never truly negotiable, becoming something less than they were in service to a goddess who herself is diminished by the very transformation that made her divine. Section 5. The Endless Archive and Eternal Questions. Within the Fortress of Memories, beyond corridors that shift according to no consistent geometry, lies the archive itself. This is where everything the Raven Queen has collected across millennia theoretically resides, preserved in whatever form, allows eternal storage of experiences never meant to outlast the souls that originally contained them. Descriptions of this archive are fragmentary and contradictory, coming from rare sources who claim to have glimpsed it. The inconsistency in these accounts suggests either that the archive appears differently to each observer, or that mortal minds struggle to comprehend what they are perceiving when confronted with something operating on divine principles. The Fortress of Memories is described in established sources as a twisted castle built from fragments and essences, constructed from pieces of dead gods and memories of the deceased. The shadar-kai bring trinkets and items to add to its structure, offerings plucked from people's pasts. It is depicted as a place of overwhelming sorrow, where the weight of accumulated loss presses down on visitors. The exact internal architecture and organization remain mysterious, because few living beings have entered and returned to provide detailed accounts. What is known suggests a structure that defies mortal understanding of space and construction. a building that embodies the concept of preserved memory in physical form. Some accounts describe vast halls lined with objects, each item carrying memories attached to it. The shadar-kai are known to seek the strange and unique, gathering objects and stories throughout the multiverse to bring back to their mistress. This suggests at least part of her collection takes physical form, memories bound to trinkets and possessions that once belonged to the dead. Other descriptions speak of something more abstract, memories existing as pure information, accessible only to the Raven Queen through divine perception. The truth might encompass both, a collection that exists simultaneously as physical objects and metaphysical data, different aspects of the same impossible archive. What the Raven Queen does with her collected memories divides into several categories based on observed patterns and accounts from her followers. The strategic deployment against undeath represents her most active application. This aligns with her documented divine portfolio as guardian of death's natural order and opponent of undeath. When she identifies a lich requiring destruction, she would logically access whatever information she possesses about that lich's mortal life and undead existence by accumulating knowledge from everyone who ever encountered a particular undead entity. She builds comprehensive intelligence about its habits, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. This tactical use of collected memories gives her advantages in coordinating attacks against targets, allowing her servants or allied mortals to strike with precise knowledge of how to succeed. Her war against Orcus relies on this accumulated intelligence. Over ages, thousands of mortals have encountered the demon prince of undeath's servants, witnessed his rituals, learned fragments of his plans. If the theories about her collection are accurate, each of these mortals eventually died, and their knowledge was potentially harvested. The Raven Queen could have assembled these fragments into comprehensive understanding of how Orcus operates, knowing the structures of his cults, the methods his priests use, the specific rituals required to summon his most powerful servants. This knowledge would allow her to sabotage his efforts systematically, disrupting rituals before completion, eliminating key cultists before they advance his agenda, countering his moves in their eternal conflict. The historical memories serve preservation purposes, maintaining what would otherwise be completely lost. If she collects memories from everyone who dies, then she possesses recollections from people who lived through vanished ages. When the last native speaker of an ancient tongue passes away, their knowledge of that language would go to her. When a lost empire's final survivor dies, memories of how that society functioned would become part of her archive. This makes her, in effect, the last repository of entire cultures, the only place where their languages and customs and daily lives still exist in any form. Whether she does this from some sense of obligation to preserve mortal heritage, or simply because her compulsion to collect extends to everything without discrimination, remains unclear from available sources. The practical applications of historical knowledge become apparent when ancient threats resurface. Evils defeated long ago sometimes awaken from imprisonment or are summoned by foolish mortals. When this happens, if the Raven Queen possesses memories from people who fought those threats originally, she could grant this knowledge to her servants or allies. This would provide tactical advantages against dangers the current world has forgotten. Similarly, when ancient artifacts resurface, whose purposes have been lost to time, she might have collected memories from their creators or original users, allowing her to understand their functions and hazards. This positions her as an invaluable resource for dealing with threats from forgotten eras. The memories related to her own lost identity occupy a special category that defines much of her motivation. Somewhere among the experiences she has collected might be the key to recovering what she lost when she ascended to godhood. This is not mere speculation, but connects directly to her documented origin. When the corrupted ritual killed her mortal form, and she pulled the dead memories of the Shadowfell around herself to create new existence, her original identity was lost in the process. She cannot remember her mortal name. She does not know the specifics of who she was before transformation. Perhaps someone who lived in that ancient era knew her mortal name. Perhaps a scholar who studied similar rituals recorded details that would reveal her identity. Perhaps a friend or enemy from her mortal life carried knowledge of who she was. This search is complicated by the fundamental problem that she does not fully know what she is looking for. How do you find information when you cannot clearly identify it? She knows she had a name, but she does not know what sounds or syllables composed it. She knows she belonged to a civilization, but she does not know its distinguishing characteristics that would allow her to recognize it. She knows she performed a ritual, but the exact methods and components are lost to her. This forces her to examine vast quantities of memories, looking for anything that resonates with the emptiness inside her, where identity should reside. It is searching for something specific without being able to describe what makes it different from everything else. The irony of her situation carries tragic weight. She possesses what may be the most comprehensive collection of memories in existence, knows more about the lives and experiences of others than perhaps any being except gods of knowledge themselves. Yet she cannot remember her own past. She is surrounded by the preserved identities of billions of mortals, but her own identity remains inaccessible. This creates existential frustration that drives her continued collection. Perhaps the next soul passing through will carry the information she needs. Perhaps the next memory harvested will finally contain the clue that unlocks her past. The possibility, however remote, ensures that she never stops gathering, never becomes satisfied with what she has accumulated. Some scholars who study the Raven Queen theorize that her name might be reconstructed through linguistic analysis of ancient languages preserved in her collection. If she belonged to a specific culture, names from that culture would follow certain patterns. By examining all names from the appropriate historical period, by analyzing their structures and common elements, it might be possible to narrow down possibilities. Of course, this assumes access to her archive, which mortals do not have. And it assumes she has not already performed this analysis herself with her vastly superior resources and divine perception. If the answer were that simple, she likely would have found it already across the ages she has been searching. Other theories suggest her name was not merely forgotten, but actively erased from reality by the corrupted ritual. In this interpretation, no amount of searching through memories would recover it, because the name does not exist anywhere anymore. It was unmade at a fundamental level, removed so completely that even those who knew it in the past never actually knew it once the ritual concluded. This theory is deeply disturbing because it suggests her search is futile, that she pursues something that cannot be found because it no longer exists in any form. Whether the Raven Queen accepts this possibility or continues to hope for recovery despite it remains unknown. Her followers speak of her eternal search, but cannot say whether she believes it will eventually succeed. There are philosophical implications to her collection that extend beyond her personal situation. If memories can be removed without destroying the soul, what does that suggest about the nature of identity? Are you the sum of your experiences, or is there some essential self that persists regardless of what you remember? The Raven Queen's harvest, if it functions as theorized, forces confrontation with these questions. It demonstrates practically that memory and identity are separable, that you can lose significant portions of your past and continue existing. But does that continued existence represent the same person or someone fundamentally changed by absence? This raises questions about continuity of consciousness across time. The person you were 10 years ago had different memories, different experiences, shaping their personality and choices. Are you the same person as that earlier version? Or have you become someone new through accumulated experience? If memories from those 10 years were harvested, would you revert to being who you were before them? Or would you be someone else entirely? Neither your current self nor your past self, but a new configuration without the bridge of experience connecting them. These are not merely abstract philosophical puzzles, but practical concerns for anyone who has been resurrected and returned missing pieces of their recollection. The dead who arrive in their afterlives incomplete, if the collection theories are accurate, must grapple with these questions personally. They exist knowing something is missing, but unable to fully articulate what. This might be easier than remembering what was taken, actually. If you remembered the harvest itself, if you knew exactly what memories had been claimed, the knowledge would be agonizing. Instead, there is only vague awareness of absence, the sense that something is gone without the pain of knowing precisely what. This could represent a mercy in the Raven Queen's method, whether intentional or simply inherent to how the process functions. Her archive, if it exists as her followers believe, represents something unprecedented in the multiverse. Other beings collect information. Libraries exist across countless worlds filled with books and scrolls. Gods accumulate understanding through divine perception and the prayers of worshippers. Ancient beings like dragons hoard historical accounts and artifacts. But none of these collections would approach what the Raven Queen possesses if the theories are accurate. She would have direct experiential memory from billions of individuals across thousands of years. She would not merely know about events, but have multiple first-hand perspectives on nearly every significant occurrence in recorded history and vast amounts of unrecorded history as well. If she chose to share this collection, the implications would be staggering. Historians could reconstruct lost civilizations with perfect accuracy. Philosophers could study how billions of people actually experienced life, death, love, loss, and every other aspect of existence. Linguists could revive dead languages. Artists could understand how people from vanished cultures perceived beauty. The archive could answer virtually any question about mortal experience across history, but she does not share it based on all available accounts. She keeps it locked away in her fortress, accessible only to herself, and perhaps her most trusted servants in limited circumstances. The knowledge exists, but remains unavailable, like treasure buried so deep that no one will ever recover it. You might wonder what will happen to the collection eventually. Does it continue forever, growing eternally as more mortals die and pass through her domain? Will there come a point when even divine ability to organize and maintain it becomes overwhelmed by sheer volume? Or is the archive somehow infinite in capacity, able to absorb endless memories without limit? These questions have no clear answers from available sources. The Raven Queen has maintained her collection for ages already, and shows no sign of stopping or struggling with the scale. Perhaps time and space function differently within the archive, allowing it to contain more than should be possible. Perhaps she has methods of organization that prevent overflow despite constant accumulation. There is also the question of what would happen if the Raven Queen were somehow destroyed. Gods can die, though it requires extraordinary circumstances. If she were killed, if her divine essence were obliterated, would the archive persist without her? Would it collapse, releasing billions of memories back into the void? Would another deity claim it as spoils? If her very existence is constructed from collected memories, as her origin story suggests, her death might mean the immediate dissolution of everything she has gathered. The memories themselves might be so dependent on her divine power to maintain them that without her, they would simply cease to exist. The consequences of losing such a comprehensive record of mortal experience would be incalculable. Assuming the record exists in the form her followers believe, her collection will continue as long as she exists. Every day brings new deaths, new souls passing through her threshold, new potential additions to the endless archive. You will eventually make that journey if death finds you in the natural course of existence. When your life ends, when your final breath escapes, and your consciousness separates from flesh, you will pass through the Shadowfell based on established understanding of how souls travel to their afterlives. What happens during that passage, whether you encounter collection directly or remain unaware of any process occurring, depends on factors beyond current mortal understanding. Perhaps the theories about her collection offer a strange kind of immortality. Your body will decay. Your soul will move to whatever afterlife awaits. But if memories are taken and preserved as suggested, moments from your life will exist eternally, unchanged and perfect, kept safe in her fortress. Experiences you might have forgotten, if you lived longer, will be preserved exactly as they occurred. In this way, pieces of everyone continue forever in her collection if it functions as described. You never fully disappear. Some fragment remains, locked away in the gray realm between life and death, in the archives of a goddess who cannot remember her own name, but might remember countless moments from yours. This is the nature of what scholars and followers believe about the Raven Queen's collection. This is what she may take from the dead based on patterns observed and accounts gathered. This is the cost of mortality and the strange preservation it might offer. When you think about death, when you contemplate what awaits beyond the final threshold, remember that the journey may not be simple transition. You might pause in between, stand in gray twilight while ravens circle overhead, and give up pieces of yourself to a collection spanning ages. Your memories could join billions of others in an archive that contains multitudes, contributing to a goddess whose own identity was the price of her power, whose existence depends on gathering what others have lost, whose eternal search for her forgotten name drives her to claim the names and moments of everyone who passes through her realm. If you found this deep dive into the Raven Queen's collection meaningful, if you appreciate explorations of death and memory and the strange spaces between them, consider subscribing to this channel. Share this with others who hunger for comprehensive lore, who want to understand the darker corners of existence, who seek knowledge about what might truly happen when life ends. Like this video if it resonated with you. Comment with your thoughts about the Raven Queen, about memory and identity, about what you think happens to the pieces of ourselves that she may claim. Your engagement helps this content reach others who crave this depth of storytelling and lore exploration. Until next time, remember that every moment you experience might one day be part of something larger than yourself. Live fully, remember deeply, and know that when the end comes, perhaps something will remain, preserved forever in the archives of eternity, in the fortress of memories, where a goddess who lost herself continues her endless search among the fragments of countless lives.